caught my girlfriend cheating with a UFC fighter. Story 1. She cheated on me from the jump. I'll be honest, I'm 23 years old and in college right now, and my partner is in graduate school. But the relationship was serious and had been 14 months long, and we had been talking about perhaps getting married after I finished, which was meant to be in December. I flunked because of this, and while the school cleared my record, it's now 9 weeks from today. We had this plan to get married. Then after she finished a year later, if I had the money, we would fly to Brussels for a honeymoon and then decide whether or not to have a family. If any of that is too risky on Rule 1, I apologize, but I am not attempting to breach any rules. To me, it is a serious, long-term relationship, which is why I believe it belongs here. I kept quiet about it because I was embarrassed that it happened to me. I've been cheated on before, but I've never felt so pitiful. My boyfriend and I met in early September 2020, and I believed we had something truly special. We were frighteningly similar, and everything seemed to be wonderful and well behaved. I had a couple moments of concern since she had a few man pals she did overnight excursions with, but I assured myself I was being paranoid. We had discussed whether we were exclusive and committed about a month ago, and the answer was yes, so I was going to trust her. Things began to heat up in early October, but it's a gradual train crash. She began talking about this 30-year-old unsuccessful MMA fighter who was like a brother to her and emphasized his abs many times. I informed her that I wasn't good with it and that I wanted to meet him. She replied, "Absolutely, you'd get along wonderfully," and I left. A week later, there was a conversation, and I joked that the only reason she dates me is because I can move her stuff. She suddenly appears out of nowhere and says, "Well, UFK man can do it, and he can take out my sofa after bashing me into it." I came to a halt, exclaimed, and said that this was not acceptable. She attempted to tell me that my joke was worse, but I was so offended that I asked her straight out whether she had been cheating. "First, it is none of your business, and second, you know, I would never," she responded. I should have called it right then and there, but I told myself that I was foolish. Fast forward to one night when she gets me these incredibly costly boots out of the blue. She had no reason, she said, but she said I looked pleased and that was essential. But it was also like $200 boots, and she lives on $800 a month for rent and food, and she is in debt spending more than that. That night, she called and said she needed me badly and was on her way to get me. We were going to stay in her flat and play home for a week. I was a little concerned since I had worked the following day and couldn't simply get there from her apartment, but she insisted on paying for an Uber or whatever. I agreed and made plans to cover for my absence for the week. When I arrived, we watched Beetlejuice and then went to bed. The next morning, I awoke early and went out to purchase us donuts before returning, and when she awoke, she had a million things to do. It had been a long day, and I realized at the end that I would need to complete schoolwork while I was at her house, so I asked if I could use her laptop, and she said yes and gave me the password. I left for work at 6 a.m. and returned at 10 p.m. to an empty apartment with a letter saying she had an emergency with her grandmother and would be returning soon, as well as to babysit her dog. I replied okay and had a bath before going to use her computer when I discovered the messages. Her communications were shown on her fucking computer, and the final message was her messaging, "UFC man, I can't wait to taste you tonight." I contacted her because I was nauseous and shaking and wanted an explanation. She was furious and demanded to know why I was in her messages, which I told her she had left up. She then acknowledged that she was with a UFC man down south and that they had plans for the following 5 days. I asked if I could go, and she answered yes, but only if I killed her dog and left her flat to be looted. I broke down and remained like a fool, resulting in a series of panic episodes, and my life essentially became feeding and caring for that dog, followed by swallowing NyQuil to put myself to sleep. She came home, sat me down, and told me she loved me but wasn't attracted to me, that she had been dating the UFC man for 2 weeks, and that was the end of it, she vowed. I was furious, so I returned her fucking guilt boots and left. She returned 2 days later, apologizing and expressing her desire to make things right. I decided to forgive her, but she kept calling late at night in this breathless voice that made me sick because I knew she was cheating, but didn't accuse her. Then one night she proclaimed me her soulmate, and everything that followed practically shouted OC, rap. I have to go. He's coming down the stairs right now. Goodbye. I knew what was going on, and I was fucking done. I walked away, telling her to herself and that I despised her. That was the day after my birthday, November 9th. I was in a poor position and began drinking again and doing other awful things to myself, nearly dying as a result, but I healed somewhat and wasn't actively messing up my life. I shaved my head, lost 20 pounds in 3 weeks and have since lost another 60, and I stopped seeing people socially and still haven't since it happened, with 3 exceptions with my best friend. Then, in December, she returned. She realized she was a monster and wanted to make things right. I told her I disliked her and didn't want to see her, but she threatened to injure herself, so I caved and let her take me to her apartment. I held her while she cried non-stop about how she was a monster and how no one but me had ever loved her and blah blah blah. I gritted my teeth and struck a pact with myself. I'd try to forgive, but there would be rules, and she was on thin ice. We really spent a whole day and a half drafting the contract she insisted on retaining on her Google Drive and a point system for her transgressions since she didn't trust me not to walk away for no reason. We spent Christmas together watching movies and decorating a tree, and she broke down again and confessed. Apparently, she was seeing other guys the whole time we were together, and to top it off, her nasty former boyfriend wasn't her ex until 2 months into our relationship. She said he was violent, but I honestly doubt it. After the event, I checked into him and it seemed she had all the cards and pushed him into the army to get rid of him so she could about. I told her to stop talking because I didn't want to hear any more of what she was saying. As a result of her deception, I promised myself to strive harder, and so we find ourselves in this situation. We came to an end on the date, and the next morning she texted me, claiming she was ill but wanted to express her affection for me and express her want to speak with me. All right, I said, go get some rest. In the evening of the same day, I had a question about something in the contract, and I swear to you that the wording on one of our agreements about where we would meet had been changed because I had specifically stated that it had to be within an hour walking distance of my home for my safety, but it had been changed to 2 hours driving, which is absurd. When she answered the phone, I overheard her shout, "It's nothing," before sprinting out the door and shutting it behind her. My stomach fell and my first thought was, "Where are you?" I immediately asked. "I'll tell you, but you're not allowed to be unhappy," she said, and that was the end of it. I didn't say anything and she then revealed that she had returned to the UF boy's place. Wow, I couldn't stop myself from repeating that again and over. She alternated between saying, "You don't have a right to be mad," and saying, "We were simply sitting on his couch watching Game of Thrones," as she proceeded to repeat the two phrases again. I ended my phone conversation with her and went for a walk. During that night, I walked about 20 miles, just enjoying an out-of-body experience, until I was picked up by my best friend, who drove me home and sat with me the whole way. The real sting is that when I returned to check on the contract later that night while wandering about, she had taken it down. Her social media accounts, Facebook and Venmo, were suspended, and I'm sure she had the other guy suspend my Facebook account as well, so I couldn't alert her. I've been feeling numb ever since, and it's been quite tough for me to get back on my feet. The thought of keeping this bottled up has been torturous, so I'm pressuring myself to say something. I'm not sure what more to say or why I've come to this place. I believe all I really want to know is what it is right now. To be quite honest, it has been really tough and lonely. Although my closest friend checked in on me on January 20th and took me to see my grandmother last Monday, I've been on my own for the most part since then. I can't even bring myself to talk about it with my friends or family since it's too painful and embarrassing for them to hear. I'm really at a loss for what to say at this point. Story 2. How my marriage survived my wife cheating. My wife, female 55, cheated on me, male 61, early in our marriage. I found out why and focused on correcting my mistakes. Her guilt sentiments resulted in an almost silent bedroom. It took a long time, but we made it. This was almost 30 years ago. We had been married for 2 years. My wife has never been in a relationship with anybody other than me. She knew I had a few before I met her, but not many. So she was intrigued, and I understood that. There was no doubt about it, it was a violation of trust. I was putting her through her last years of college. On day 3, we had 1 kid, EPT positive, and our honeymoon was gone. I worked extremely hard and stayed up late. She was tremendously envious of a co-worker, an actual beauty pageant queen with whom I shared a real office with a lockable door. She had no cause to worry there. I was a decent guy and she was too, and much out of my league anyhow. In fact, many ladies almost flung themselves at me, and I waved them off. No one who has been cheated on should blame themselves, and I don't, but you can understand it if you examine the circumstances. New family, new job, extremely late hours, and then they had me go to trade events to show off my work. In year 2, I was gone for 60 days, a few days at a time. Furthermore, it was just my second relationship, and the last one had ended abruptly. I had no concept how to be a good attentive boyfriend or spouse, or that this incredibly gorgeous lady needed to hear how much I loved her and how lovely she was all the time. We were both so busy creating our life and caring for our kid that we didn't have much time for each other, although we did go out with friends on a few occasions. This man, a guy her age from college, certainly got into her brain. I'm 6 years older than she was at the time. When we bumped into him at a party one night, I sensed a feeling that didn't sit well with me, but she said she was assisting her buddy, F23, in getting with him. And that made sense. Anyway, I had to pick up the child from the babysitter, and we had a small argument because I wanted her to accompany me. She said that she needed to assist a buddy. Then I saw she wasn't wearing any underwear underneath her short skirt and hose. Her buddy confirmed her account, but I was still enraged. She was not going with me. I stormed out. She was driven home by a buddy who was clearly inebriated. She swore nothing occurred that night, and she still does. She was all on me when she got home, which I appreciated. Nothing appeared out of the ordinary over the following several days, and I let it go after making it plain that it was not okay. She seems to agree. We had just acquired our first home a year and a half later. I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary, yet we had grown apart. She was mostly irritated by my overwork, and we weren't spending much time together in bed because of packing, relocating, and all the other nonsense that comes with it. So everything became chilly, and I assumed it was simply because we were too busy. She finally admitted it one afternoon after unpacking. We were trying for a second child. She kept delaying me. Then I knew something was wrong, and she informed me, tearfully. He was clearly in discomfort. She informed me about it. They were in the same class. They met in the month after the nightclub night. He was driving his automobile. I requested specifics, and she couldn't provide them, but I was able to pull it all together. She was definitely filled with remorse. Was a chore for her, and she went through the motions for a long time. But I loved her before all of this, and seeing her in anguish wounded me. I assumed that time would cure this, except the demands of having 2 children, living the middle-class ideal, and struggling with it all my life did nothing but make time fly by. We barely got by. I had to beg for every few weeks or so since she wasn't interested. After a dozen years, things improved. We began by playing different role-playing games, which at least got us started. But we'd been in the other pattern for so long that I didn't even know how to make her happy, and I'm not a good lover. She still wouldn't talk about what she wanted, so I made up minor scenarios to keep the building interesting. Things like becoming a plumber need payment, or agreeing to a huge buy only if I had. That may seem strange, but it was our thing, and we at least discussed it. So we've gotten over the cheating, and the following section is less about cheating and more about what comes around and goes around. It's a good thing we discovered our niche. We had no clue what was in store for her. Early onset arthritis, constant agony, therapy that never ends, doctors, pain relievers and surgical procedures. Multiple joint replacements are required. So another dozen years passed with little. I wasn't going to push it since I knew she wasn't feeling good. She was doped up if she wasn't in agony. It is at this moment that I shall convey my thoughts about our marriage. I made a vow to God that contained the words for better or worse, and all of this served another purpose for us. We learned how to help one another. We figured out how to communicate. She's an expert at picking up on nonverbal signs, and I'm aware of it. I did see a little porn as her sickness progressed. I recognized it was nonsense, wasn't impressed, and moved on to more realistic materials. I was seeking for ways to improve our life. To be honest, I learned about the G-spot through reading the tales, but I didn't have somewhere to go with it as long as she was sick. Then there was the miracle. It all began with awful news. Her health had been harmed by the pain relievers, and she couldn't take them anymore. It was scary for her to be in agony, but we took on the challenge jointly. We debated between a hot tub and a pool for physical therapy since I'm a cheapskate, and because we were experimenting with everything, CBD. She also had to psychologically go through it all, which she did admirably. There was a surge of energy and a penchant for as well as, and I got to put my newfound knowledge to action. It's okay. You can laugh about it. I certainly do, but hold on. There's more. COVID had struck just as we were about to begin enjoying the pool. We were able to spend more time together and we looked like newlyweds. Newlyweds aged 6 to 54. And well, we tested out the hot tub. I didn't want to go to the pool since it was too exposed to our neighbor's view. But we'd burst the seal on our exploits. I brought up toys. A little amount of BDSM was used, but it was not true BDSM. Her interest was piqued by the novels and the Shades of Grey series. Then there was Cherise Sinclair. We discussed how to do this, but I discovered that reading will not help me become a dom. She also desired a dom, so she suggested swinging. Oh my, I didn't respond properly. I didn't talk to her about it for a few months, but I did do it. I conducted some research. I investigated swinging. I looked at Reddit sites. I discovered blogs. I joined a few of websites. No, that was for science. Smile. After a few months, I returned to her with a proposal. Our bargain was that we had to be in a much better physical shape before we could join the swinger realm, particularly as an elderly couple. But owing to my study, I had a few visions in my brain of what the eventual outcome may be. As a result, we were both motivated. And you know what becomes better when your physical fitness improves. And boy, did it get better. It began in the summer. Our backyard pool became more private after some strategic building. I'm going to state unequivocally that pool is vastly underappreciated. We did run into the problem of pool water not being very good as lubrication, but we managed to make it work. But then something strange happened. I lasted a couple of hours in the water one day. I assumed it was simply the temperature changes. Then it began to happen outside of the pool. Some guys find it annoying because they cannot for as long during, but in my opinion, as a 60-year-old man, I am entitled to 2 hours of And we had that impact for almost 3 months. And we've had a couple swinger experiences since those incredible days building up to last autumn. Hey, it's been a lot of fun. And when you consider that we spent almost 30 years without having much, well, I feel like I was due this. Persistence has clearly paid off. We've taken a step back from our fast-paced freight train run and entered the swinger lifestyle. There are also more aspects involved. However, we are still extremely good together and to each other. If you only remember one item from this epic-length narrative, make it this. Cheating does not have to be the end of the road. It also does not have to take over every area of your relationship after that. What we do to ourselves is much more dangerous than anything that occurs to us. And it's also true that SHT happens. Don't look for another kind of perfection. There isn't one. Find a fighter to share your life with, someone who is willing to battle through it all with you, and make a commitment to each other to love and support one another, even after you've cheated. Also, be patient, and please forgive yourself.